This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The jury has reached a verdict in the trial of a man accused of killing his neighbor. Eric Wildman has been found guilty of first-degree murder in the 2021 death of 40-year-old Clifford Joseph. Joseph was reported missing that June, but his remains weren't found until more than a month later. Prosecutors alleged Wildman hit Joseph with his vehicle when he caught the victim trying to steal from his property in the village of Stead, which is roughly 80 kilometers northeast of Winnipeg. They say he then took the injured man to another location where he executed him. When Wildman learned he was going to be arrested as a suspect in the killing, he fled to Ontario. The jury didn't hear that the manhunt ended with Wildman shooting at police in that province. He was found guilty last year of attempted murder for that incident. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew spent a second day in Washington, D.C. It's part of an effort to convince the Trump administration not to impose tariffs on Canadian goods. As CBC's Bartley Kivas reports, Kinew and his fellow premiers so far have little to show for their efforts.
Premier Manitoba.
Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew put on a brave face in the U.S. Capitol, where Canada's premiers gathered Wednesday in another effort to convince the Trump administration there's value in continuing cross-border trade.
Canadians have seen that when we stick up for ourselves, great things happen.
So far, those great things have yet to materialize. Some of the premiers ran into Elon Musk in a hallway yesterday, and most of them met with Trump assistant James Blair. After that meeting, Blair went on to repeat Donald Trump's continuing desire to make Canada the 51st state. Even after the taunt, Kinew insisted a diplomatic effort can still bear fruit.
Every Canadian agrees they're not going to be the 51st state. But when it comes to being a number one friend to the U.S., I think there's the opportunity for us to come down and build a relationship.
The premier said today he met with a higher-level official, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, the former governor of North Dakota.
He's been to Manitoba many times. He knows where we are on the map. He knows what our province is all about.
Kinew urged patience on the part of Manitobans, but a U of M political studies professor says the trip will likely prove futile when it comes to avoiding tariffs imposed by a president who doesn't listen.
To be heard is one thing, to be listened to and to be taken seriously is a different thing. And I'm not sure when being granted an audience with lower level figures in the Trump White House, whether we should be all that reassured.
Tariffs are slated to be imposed on Canadian goods in March. Bartley Kivas, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A survey of staff in Manitoba's Justice Department has found that a majority of Manitoba's Crown prosecutors reported mental health issues related to their work. The previously unreleased survey results were obtained by CBC and show prosecutors dealing with a high level of work-related trauma. Veerlin Kubanek reports.
A recent survey suggests the lawyers who pursue justice for Manitoba are suffering under heavy workloads. And 2/3 of those who responded met the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, or depression. The 2023 study also found that 16 out of 150 prosecutors surveyed had contemplated suicide in the year prior to the survey.
It's heartbreaking, obviously, to hear that someone has sort of hit that point where they think that might be sort of a solution to their what is often burnout or other mental health issues that they're facing.
More than half said their career would suffer if they disclosed mental health issues.
I think, unfortunately, there's still a stigma. There has long been, I think, a bit of a macho culture in the legal profession that we just sort of suck it up and that you just pile on the work.
A source who CBC is not identifying because it could harm their job shared some results of the survey. CBC did not see the report, but the union representing Crown attorneys confirmed the figures. Wickstrom says prosecutors need to be able to do their jobs well to protect public safety. The Manitoba Association of Crown Attorneys has criticized the provincial government for failing to take meaningful action on workload. But Justice Minister Matt Wiebe puts the blame on the government in office prior to the 2023 election.
It's such a clear indictment of how the previous government treated our crowns, how they treated our justice system, how they disrespected those who do this work every single day.
Wiebe says his NDP government has increased pay rates and is addressing concerns around the workplace culture and mental health. He says that since taking office, his government has hired 35 new Crown attorneys and 20 new support staff.
The Union for Prosecutors says that while the staff survey has led to some change, fundamental issues still have not been addressed. The minister says he has a meeting with the Prosecutors Union next week. Vera Lynn Kubanek, CBC News, Winnipeg.
When the temperatures drop, many people hunker down indoors. At school, it means staying inside when those extreme cold warnings hit. But a select group of students are embracing the outdoors, no matter how cold. CBC's Felicia Adam met a few members of the Polar Bear Club.
These students are getting ready for close to -30 temperatures. Jackets, snowsuits, gloves, and boots. Just a few of the layers they're wearing.
Let's see, everyone has their mix?
They're part of the Polar Bear Club at General Vanier School. Once bundled up, they're out the door.
We play with sleds, we play grounders, and we play with the snow. It's pretty nice, and I like playing with my friends outside.
So you don't like staying inside for recess then?
No.
Generally, when temperatures hit -30, students stay inside for indoor recess. But for the 15-some students a part of Polar Bear Club, they brave temperatures as low as -40.
The very first day we were out, we were -38 with the wind.
Marcia Leary is a 3rd and 4th grade teacher. The Polar Bear Club at the school began in December of last year. She says after an indoor recess had been called, one of her students let out a loud groan. That student was Emmett Legeen.
I find it more fun outside because you get to have fresh air and you get to at least stretch your legs a little.
And while it's new for these students, the Louis Riel School Division says programs like these have been running for years at other schools. Leary says when kids go outside to play, they're able to focus more in class.
They're able to, move those muscles, and then they come back in and they can attend to things better. They can sit longer. Their brain is awake again.
Thursday was another frigidly cold day in Winnipeg, but the Polar Bear Club is enjoying every minute of it.
You ready to go in? No.
Until it's time to go back inside. Felicia Adam, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Weather specialist Riley Laychuk in now. And Riley, I love that collective no from all those kids. But you know what? There's a lot of people saying yes to staying indoors right now.
Especially when you look at some of these temperatures behind me. Here's where we started the day today. -39 first thing this morning in Thompson, -38 in Lynn Lake, -36 this morning in Brandon. Yikes is all I've got to say. Here's where we got to this afternoon. Winnipeg, we actually got to -17 downtown this afternoon. A couple degrees higher than expected, but still close to -20 elsewhere in the province. Well below seasonal for this time of the year. Another cold night ahead, looking at wind chill values -40 or lower through the Westman region into the Parkland, and as cold as -50 into northern Manitoba. This is frostbite on exposed skin in minutes. So we're looking at another very cold night tonight. Increasing clouds in Winnipeg down to -29 overnight tonight, -27 first thing in the morning in Brittany, up to -19 by the time we get to the afternoon. Tomorrow, another below seasonal day. I know I start to sound like a broken record now, and I'll have more on when this starts to lift when I come back in a bit.
One more to the long weekend.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
One person was trapped inside the upper story of a home this morning as crews battled a fire on Winnipeg Avenue. Heavy black smoke was pouring from the 2.5-story house when crews arrived. One person was trapped on an upper floor. Ladders were used to rescue the person, while other firefighters went inside to try to put the flames out. The person was taken to hospital. 2 cats were also saved from the home. The house sustained significant smoke, fire, and water damage. There was another fire around the same time this morning at a townhouse on Parr Street. One person was sent to hospital with injuries from jumping from a second-floor window. The townhouse, as well as nearby units, were temporarily evacuated. Human remains have been found inside a charred home that burned down in Pinemutang First Nation last week. The fire happened last Friday in a home off Highway 6 in Pinemutang. RCMP say when authorities combed through the debris Sunday, they found the person's remains. An identity has not been released. Police say the fire appears to be suspicious. RCMP are asking for the public's help after a couple of armed gas station robberies. The first was early last Friday morning at a gas station in Toulon. An employee told police 4 masked suspects, each with a weapon, including a handgun and baseball bat, demanded cash and cigarettes. After getting an undisclosed amount of money, police say they took off in a dark blue Mercedes-Benz. RCMP believe the same suspects also robbed a gas station in Swan Lake First Nation Sunday morning. Hey ho, get your sashes out and get ready to jig. Western Canada's largest winter festival is about to start. More on that straight ahead. A new emergency vehicle in a remote Manitoba First Nation may pave the way for better medical transportation services in isolated communities. Poplar River First Nation doesn't have an ambulance, leaving patients to be moved in pickup trucks or vans. As Josh Crabb reports, the community wants this new vehicle to change that.
It's not technically an ambulance, but the hope is this new emergency response vehicle in Poplar River First Nation can fill a gap in the remote community. Right now, people in need of medical care ride in the beds of pickup trucks or the backs of vans or SUVs. Poplar River's Fire Chief Willard Bittern says that's not acceptable.
The weather is uncomfortable for the patients in our community.
There's no ambulance service in the isolated First Nation in eastern Manitoba. That's why the community teamed up with the Southeast Resource Development Council to buy this truck. It's outfitted with a custom-built capsule, which can fit a stretcher and is filled with medical equipment and supplies. Southeast's Emergency Response Coordinator Dave Schellenberg says they got federal funding to buy the $300,000 unit.
Right now they're using it for assisting with medevacs at the request of the nurse in charge. And we're working with Manitoba Licensing and Compliance to essentially change how we deliver these medical services in remote First Nation communities.
A provincial spokesperson says Manitoba has been working with Poplar River to make sure the vehicle meets regulatory requirements. Officials with the province have given advice to the community on what specifications the truck and staff need to operate a stretcher transportation system. The province has also provided information on how the community can get a license to operate an emergency medical response system. That would be needed to use the truck as an ambulance. So far, no application has been made. 8 Poplar River residents have been trained with advanced first aid to run the vehicle. Bittern says it's important residents know how to help each other in an emergency.
For heart attack or like anything, broken leg or labor or anything like that, we can go to the homes in the community because we have people trained.
But more training may be needed before Poplar River can put this new truck to full use. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Western Canada's largest winter festival returns this Friday. Festival de Voyageurs kicks off its 56th edition. Various events will be held across different locations in Winnipeg. There'll be giant snow sculptures and concerts. More than 150 artists are expected to perform. The province says it's an integral part of the city's character.
Back in the day, people would wait for winter to be able to cross rivers and visit. Today we have cultural bridges between our communities. And Festival du Voyageur is a good example of how we can build better cultural bridges between our communities.
Bonjour. Festival runs until February 23rd. Tickets are available online. Riley's back in now, and you know what? I feel like it's part of Festival for it to be bitterly cold.
Yes.
Those snow sculptures don't melt because we've had previous years where it's been thawing and wet. So you know what? Embrace the cold, right?
Bundle up. It is looking like it's going to be a cold Valentine's Day, so there might be some cold hearts out there.
Oh.
Alas, I've got a gift for you here. Have a look at this, your Valentine's Day forecast. And just for you, Brittany, a nice -19. Partly cloudy skies through the day tomorrow. Looking at partly cloudy into the evening. If you have any evening plans tomorrow, make sure you dress for it because we're looking at a bitterly cold evening tomorrow as well. Mostly cloudy skies here in the Red River Valley. We've seen some of that cloud ebbing and flowing throughout the day today, but by and large, the rest of the province actually under a mainly sunny sky today. What's happened is that polar vortex, that polar jet around the North Pole has slumped a little bit further south, and it's actually kind of sitting over Thompson and most of northern Manitoba right now. So that is going to keep northern parts of the province cold but sunny, but a little bit of cloud into southern Manitoba. This is because of a system skirting along the international border, staying stateside, but some of the residual cloud cover moves up into the Red River Valley as we get through the day, Friday into Saturday. And this is what we're missing right here, this big weather bomb that's headed for Ontario, Quebec, and the Maritimes once again with another shot of some heavy snow in that part of our country as we get into the weekend. So your upper level atmosphere, and you can see where that dome of cold air is really just sitting and just rotating around in a circle as we get through the weekend. leading again to some very cold conditions, some very cold overnight and morning lows as we get through Sunday into Monday. It's not until we start to get into the middle part of next week, you can start to see it here, a little bit of relief by the time we get to about midweek. So we are looking at this cold snap continuing for the next several days yet before we start to inch our way closer to seasonal in your long-range forecast. Waking up to minus 29 in Dauphin tomorrow, minus 27s in Brandon, Portage, Winnipeg, but there's some of that coldest air. Minus 36 in Thompson first thing in the morning, feeling closer to minus 50 early in the morning tomorrow in parts of northern Manitoba. So again, this is frostbite on exposed skin in minutes as we get into the early morning hours tomorrow. We get to minus 19 again in Winnipeg tomorrow, minus 19 again for Saturday, and then Brittany, sunny to start next week, but these temperatures now about 12, 13 degrees below seasonal for this time of the year, and a little bit of a warm-up coming in your 7-day forecast.
We're going to do our best to keep those hearts warm tomorrow.
Yeah.
Thanks, Riley.
You're welcome.
A scathing report released by the Nurses Union says the NDP government hasn't moved the needle when it comes to fixing health care. The union, which represents more than 13,000 workers, says the system continues to be in crisis. Rosanna Hempel brings us more.
The Manitoba Nurses Union isn't mincing words on health care.
It is in crisis.
The union has released a 34-page report with data on private nursing hours, public nursing overtime, and vacancy rates trending upward from 2020 to 2024.
I can tell you one of the most heard comments I get from nurses on the front line are, when are they going to start fixing healthcare? Because we've seen no appreciable changes.
This ER nurse who works at Health Sciences Centre in Winnipeg says most days are morally grating. CBC News is not identifying her over concerns she might lose her job for speaking out.
It's just the craziness of everything that's going on. It's hard to describe. I actually would like our Premier to come, or our Minister of Health, just to come and see.
We know that the changes that Manitobans want to see, that nurses want to see, the big changes are going to take time.
Last week, they announced the province had hired 481 net new nurses to the public healthcare system since April last year.
I had messages from members asking me, where are they?
Union President Darlene Jackson accuses the NDP government of falling short on collaboration and transparency.
I can say it's very comparable with what we saw with the previous government.
Health Minister Uzoma Asaguera disagrees, saying they've been listening to frontline healthcare workers since day one in office.
Our government's approach is completely different than the previous PC government.
From Washington, D.C., Premier Wabkanu encouraged unions to be positive while pointing to his government's new hires in healthcare.
They're getting a great wage. They're getting more work-life balance. Everything that the unions have been asking for, we're delivering on.
The Nurses Union highlighted a number of recommendations in its report, including improving Manitoba's travel nurse team and sharing more information. The health minister did not commit to any of the 6 recommendations, but said they're making progress. Rosanna Hempel, CBC News, Winnipeg.
And we have to take a very short break. There's much more to come after this. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. Trump tariff threats on Canada and a Liberal leadership race. The two issues erupted almost simultaneously. And now the race to replace Justin Trudeau has Canadian-American relations at the forefront. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
In less than a month, Canada will have a new prime minister. Liberal leader candidates continue to make their pitches. Some are general.
We need to build a lot of homes.
Others specific.
A plan to update our social safety net.
We are going to go after American stakeholders who matter to the White House.
Former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland doubling down on her aggressive plan to deal with Trump's planned tariffs on Canadian exports, including aluminum and steel.
I have proposed a 100% tariff on all Teslas. I am calling on all the countries that are affected by this tariff to join us.
Former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney has notably been thin on details with the policies he's proposing. That includes how he'll deal with Trump.
I'm careful in what I say about the current status of negotiations. You may have seen, I should say, that my focus has majored on what we should do here in Canada to strengthen our economy, irrespective of what the Americans take.
Carney's approach seems to be working.
We do see in polls that Carney is preferred over Chrystia Freeland as the Liberal leader.
In a recent online survey from Leger, Canadians were asked who they trust most to defend our country's interests against Trump. 22% of respondents chose Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. 20% said Mark Carney. Only 6% picked Chrystia Freeland. That same Leger survey suggests under Freeland's leadership, the Liberals could see a decrease in public support. But with Carney at the helm, they could see a bump, one so significant the Liberals and Conservatives could be tied, when the Conservatives have enjoyed a significant lead in the polls for the last year and a half. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. President Donald Trump has signed his plan to impose reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners. Trump says it's fair to all, but he also again took aim at Canada. CBC's Paul Hunter reports from Washington.
If by this point anyone doubted Donald Trump is a massive fan of tariffs, there's no denying it now. On top of the existing threats against Canada, Mexico, and China, with the stroke of a pen this afternoon, he's now effectively threatening to put tariffs on the whole world. Reciprocal tariffs, as they're known, a kind of tit-for-tat tax on other countries who have tariffs in place against U.S. goods. Trump's new tariffs would kick in after several weeks of study by his administration, unless the other countries eliminate their tariffs. The fear is that all of this will trigger a global trade war, but Trump's thinking, as with other tariff threats, is that it'll spur manufacturing in the U.S. and create jobs in the U.S. But critics insist the more immediate effect will be that prices for American consumers will simply go up. The tariff put on imports, then passed on to whoever buys them. Trump promised in the campaign to bring prices down. So far, that hasn't happened. And now this. He himself has acknowledged short-term pain for Americans, insisting that the long-term benefit is worth it. Bottom line, he seems to be all tariffs all the time right now. He's also almost all Canada all the time as well, or so it sometimes seems. Today, without prompting, re-raising the notion of Canada becoming the 51st state.
You know, we just don't need their product. And yet they survive off the fact that we do 95% of what they do. Their taxes would come down greatly. Their security would go up greatly. Amazing things happen to Canada. Why would we pay $200 billion a year in subsidies to Canada when they're not a state? You do that for a state, but you don't do that for somebody else's country. So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state.
As is his way, he hit on a number of other topics in the Oval Office today, including that he'd like to restart nuclear arms control negotiations with Russia and China, telling reporters he'd like to get to that after, as he put it, sorting out the situations in the Middle East and Ukraine. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Fears are brewing in Canada's craft beer industry over the aluminum tariff threat. While 90% of the beer consumed in Canada is brewed domestically, most cans are imported from the U.S. And as Sarah Levitt reports, that's creating worry for beer makers on both sides of the border.
At this Toronto microbrewery, tariff talk is stressful.
Great Lakes is just one of 1,200 small independent craft breweries operating all throughout Canada, and we're already struggling.
Struggling after COVID impacts, inflation, and now another threat. Potential tariffs on a material essential to their business, aluminum cans.
Well, Sarah, I can't actually swear on camera.
More than half of U.S. aluminum imports come from Canada, primarily Quebec, but the cans themselves are made in the United States. Prices on cans of food, carbonated drinks, and beer could go up.
So it's really going to be hard to absorb without passing anything along to the consumer at the cash register.
Great Lakes Brewery buys its cans for an average of 14 cents each. Now, individually, that might not seem like a lot, but last year they bought 6 million cans, and that cost $840,000. With a 25% tariff, it will cost them more than $1 million.
If this goes on for any length of time, we will be paying significantly more for something that's at the core of what we make and sell.
The worries aren't just north of the border.
It's going to directly affect us, our relationship with our Canadian suppliers.
This Chicago microbrewer says things will be rough for them, too.
You know, we're a small business. We can't just absorb that. It's not really built into our financials, and it's just kind of the way it is for us smaller guys.
Now, these brewers say it's a wait-and-see game. Will the tariffs come into effect, and at what rate? In the meantime, many are getting their cans as fast as they can. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Montreal.
At least 28 people have been injured, some gravely, after a car plowed into a crowd in Munich. As CBC's Margaret Evans reports, German authorities believe it may have been a deliberate attack.
A heavy police presence still on the streets in the hours after the apparent attack. A small white car driving into a trade union rally during a public sector strike in the center of Munich, sowing fear and chaos. Working nearby, eyewitness Alexa Greve says it looked like the car accelerated into the crowd. There were some injured people on the bench right next to our office, she says. Some of them were carried into the entrance hall, treated by paramedics. Police arrested the driver reportedly after firing one shot. He's been identified as a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker who reportedly came to Germany as a minor in 2016. His claim rejected, according to the Interior Ministry. The incident comes just a day before the Munich Security Conference, attended by world dignitaries, is expected to begin. Police don't believe there's a link. Bavaria's Premier Markus Söder says he does believe it was a deliberate attack of some sort. There are many indications of that, he says. We react prudently to any such attack, but I can also tell you that our resolve is growing. Security and immigration issues have dominated the current federal election campaign in Germany in the wake of a string of similar attacks in recent months. The far-right Alternative for Germany party accused of using them to stoke anti-immigrant sentiment, with rights groups pointing to a spike in attacks on asylum seekers. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Berlin.
Ukraine's president is making it clear his country will not be left out of President Trump's plans to end the war there. His comments come a day after Trump launched that process with a surprise phone call to Russian President Vladimir Putin. CBC's Chris Brown with more on the fallout.
It was a telephone call the whole world is talking about, gushed Russia's top news channels, casting it as a big win for Vladimir Putin that Donald Trump phoned him before Vladimir Zelensky, and even thanked Putin for wanting to end the war he started in the first place. The Russian leader's long-standing goal has been to make Ukraine a puppet state, so Trump's plan smelled of betrayal to many Ukrainians, leaving its president to put on a brave face.
Ми просто не зможемо акцептувати.
We as a sovereign country simply will not be able to accept any agreements without us, said Zelensky.
Had a great call.
Trump said Zelensky might not even be part of the talks at first, nor would the European countries that would guarantee Ukraine's security afterward.
Any deal behind our backs will not work. Any agreement will need also Ukraine and Europe being part of it, and this is clear that appeasement also always fails.
In Brussels for a NATO meeting, the U.S. Defense Secretary insisted no one is being cut out.
There is no betrayal there. There is a recognition that the whole world and the United States is invested and interested in peace.
This Ukrainian MP says it's unclear what leverage Trump plans to use against Putin to push back.
He put it in very abstract terms, which to me signifies that he doesn't have yet clear picture of a peace plan or what should be done.
But after 3 years of continual war, Ukrainians are exhausted. This wounded infantryman spoke to our CBC producer. I have a lot of friends in captivity, he said. When all the guys come back home, then it will be a victory for me. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
Well, we do need to take a very quick break. Coming back after, friendly Manitoba or isolated Manitobans. How some students and community members are looking to rebuild the social culture on campus. More on that straight ahead. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Stay with us. Shop Canadian has been one of the responses to the continued tariff threats, and a new Léger poll suggests that sentiment is picking up considerable steam. The CBC's Scott Peterson has the story.
It's hard to say when consumers in this country have been more patriotic, but we are seeing exactly that. More Canadians wanting to buy Canadian goods, knowing where to buy Canadian goods. And this is an important metric for a lot of retailers. If people vote with their dollars as far as buying Canadian products over U.S. ones, the retailers are sitting up and noticing that. This is coming out in a recent poll by Léger. As far as the vast majority of us, in fact, 81% of Canadians say that they have, quote, significantly increased how many Canadian-made products they intend to buy. 56% said that they're ready to cancel and avoid U.S. travel altogether. 59% say that they're ditching U.S. alcohol for products made here in Canada. But the intention here is clear, that there's an emphasis on buying Canadian products in light of what is happening with the potential of U.S. tariffs. Also, we're hearing more stories as far as advertising out there. We're seeing things from Sobeys, from Loblaws, advertising their Canadian roots, saying that they have Canadian products, whether it's carrots or apples, tomatoes, pork or beef. Loblaws has been featuring a Canadian pork, proudly being Canadian since 1919. Tim Hortons saying that they want to increase the amount of Canadian products they're buying. In a statement, Tim Hortons saying that the vast majority of everything at Tim Hortons is sourced from Canada for Canada. We are among the biggest supporters of Canadian farmers and have large relationships with many Canadian manufacturers and producers. And so retailers really are noticing a trend by Canadians wanting to have more Canadian products, more Canadian symbols as far as what they're buying. And so this is a trend that we're seeing playing out for a lot of Canadian consumers and retailers at the same time. Scott Peterson, CBC News, Toronto.
Hitting the books hard is an important part of university life, but so is making the most of those moments out of the classroom. But how do you do that when people don't want to stick around after their classes end? CBC's Gavin Axelrod spent some time at the University of Manitoba last month as part of our Communities in Focus series. He heard from students and community members about how they're trying to rebuild the social culture.
Danielle Ahmed says life at the University of Manitoba just isn't the same as when he was a student from 2012 to 16. He remembers events being packed. People were more friendly to each other, and when something was happening on campus, people wanted to be there.
We've had parties where people have come in, events people have come in, but it just doesn't feel like the same energy that it was pre-COVID, yeah.
Ahmed is also the business manager here at IQ's, a campus cafe run by the University of Manitoba Students' Union. He says it's slow right now, attributing high costs of living to part of the problem. But he also says another big part of it is because the way people socialize has just changed.
It's been like really slow. You can tell by the foot traffic, also by the numbers, of course, in the business.
Student Union President Divya Sharma pinpoints that change to the pandemic. She says it made people want to stay in more and didn't help social development either. Many her age also dreamed of a university experience like something out of a movie, not one that started virtually.
We didn't really get to do that because we had to quarantine, and now we're seeing the consequences of that.
Some students like Dion Roque agree.
Compared to like other schools or like in the States, for example, where like people would stay for like games or whatever, I feel like it's a bit harder here with that. It would be more fun, I feel like, for sure. Because like you could actually look forward to something other than just studying.
The University of Manitoba had more than 30,000 enrolled in the fall 2024 term. Many CBC News spoke to said the university has become just a commuter campus, meaning many come to school and leave to go elsewhere when they're done.
It allows me to meet less people or less opportunities and activities that I can do with people, so it definitely affects it.
To help combat the issue, the university's Wellness Center hosted a speed friending event back in January. Arlana Vadney oversees the center. Only 11 students came, but she says that's still a success.
A lot of people aren't as comfortable, walking up to somebody and saying, hey, how's it going? Or connecting with somebody who's staring at their phone as they wait for class to start.
But she also says
people need to look for those opportunities as well.
Those opportunities do exist. If you ask Isham Singh, the answer is to join a club or student group. At one point, he was part of more than a dozen of them. He says it's up to students to make the most of their time out of the classroom.
You might find the nicest communities or the weirdest communities by just searching around, and then you show up to their events and you decide if you like it, and you'll find friends there.
Meanwhile, Ahmed and Sharma say things are starting to look up, but know there's still a long way to go. Gavin Axelrod, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Riley back in now. Riley, it can be so hard to make those friends, especially as an adult. We know that friendships are relationships. They take work. People, when they're going to school, have to work outside of school, not just on their studies. So it's hard. It's tough.
Yes. Busy.
Busy. A lot of people staying indoors right now because of how cold it is. So making that hard to as well.
That too. I walked to work this morning, and in the sun, you could actually feel a little bit of heat from that sun, even though it's bitterly cold out there.
You just can't see the smile under everybody.
I know. So we've been stuck in this cold weather pattern for days now, and it's going to stick around for several more days yet, thanks to that cold, icy, dreaded polar vortex. That Arctic jet stream, as I was saying earlier in the show, has slipped a bit off course from the North Pole down to the prairies. Have a look at this.
There are two words that can strike fear in even the most hardy of Canadians during the wintertime. It thrives in winter weather and delivers some of the coldest air in the world. It's the dreaded polar vortex.
Polar vortex. Polar vortex.
Polar vortex.
But wait, does the polar vortex really deserve the harsh rep it gets? To start with, a polar vortex doesn't just rear its ugly head unexpectedly.
It's a persistent area of low pressure that hangs out around both of the Earth's poles, rotating all year long. It's weaker in the summer when it holds the frigid air in like a dam. Not so bad, right? Thanks for that polar vortex. It gets stronger in the winter. If the temperature warms up enough in the Arctic during this time, the polar jet stream can wander off course, causing the polar vortex to also slip off course, moving southward right towards us.
It's kind of like opening the freezer door when that happens. All of that cold air chills southern Canada and the United States. It can last anywhere from a few days to a few weeks.
And when the polar vortex visits, it can bring a few unpopular plus ones.
The first, freezing temperatures. We're talking 20 to 30 degrees colder than normal. And the second, strong winds as more air is drawn in from the north.
But for those reasons, a polar vortex can be a lot to handle. But if you dress for the weather and leave yourself extra time on those icy commutes, you've got nothing to be afraid of.
For the record, I was not allowed to eat that ice cream. I had to put it back. Not sure whose it was in the work freezer, but wasn't mine. Anyway, you can see where that vortex has kind of sunk down here. You can start to see that on our upper level winds here, where that polar jet stream has sunk just a little bit further south, and that's what's allowing us to really stay considerably colder for this extended period of time. Totally different story east of us. So we saw that system move through Ontario, Quebec, now into the Maritimes, bringing some heavy snow, but there's another one on the way. So here's that first system as it pushes off into Friday through the Maritime provinces, but look at it, what's happening right in behind that. Another one starts to form as we get through Saturday, bringing another shot of heavy snow and some very messy conditions into eastern parts of the province. So while we're stuck in the cold weather, other parts of the province gearing up for another very wintry mess coming to parts of Ontario in particular. This is Lucy. Thanks, Bernadine, for sending this story in. Lucy enjoyed a 20-minute walk, which is probably about as much as I could take being outside as well. You can send your pictures to talkback@cbc.ca. Minus 27 first thing in the morning, looking at a high of minus 19 through the afternoon into the evening hours. A mix of sun and clouds really throughout the day tomorrow, as we see that cloud from the United States kind of ebbing and flowing throughout the region as we get through into the day on Friday. So tonight, looking at temperatures again in the west into the minus 30s. This is where we still have that extreme cold warning in place. Temperatures dipping below minus 30, wind chill feeling colder than minus 40, which again is frostbite on exposed skin in 10 minutes or less really across much of southern Manitoba. Could see wind chills As low as -50 in parts of northern Manitoba, starting at -35 in Gillam tomorrow, up to -29 by lunchtime, and really staying in the -20s once again into northern Manitoba through the day. Into southern Manitoba, starting at -30 in Dauphin tomorrow, -28 in Brandon. A touch warmer into the Red River Valley, but still another very cold day tomorrow with that cloud ebbing and flowing as we get into the afternoon hours. So, I mean, through the day, yes, we might see some cloud cover, but some peaks of sunshine in there as well. Really doesn't do a lot to our temperatures, though, Brittany. We're stuck at -19 tomorrow afternoon.
It's going to be a cold Valentine's.
Yes, it will.
Thanks, Riley. Well, after the break, take a moment to stop and eat the flowers. We'll explain when we come back. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. We have dramatic video of a U.S. Navy jet that crashed into the San Diego Bay in California. Luckily, both pilots safely ejected before the Boeing Growler slammed into the water. Eyewitnesses say they saw the jet flying very low earlier. The two pilots were seen ejecting out before it plunged into the bay. U.S. Coast Guard says they were rescued by a fishing vessel that quickly rushed in to help. The Navy says it's investigating the cause of the crash. Winter has roared through with a swath of the country at full blast, with most of Canada's major cities under some kind of weather warning. And it wasn't just buses spinning their wheels in Ottawa this morning. A lot of people who ventured out found themselves stuck in drifts of heavy, wet snow. That includes a plow seemed jammed into a snowbank in downtown Toronto. In Kitchener or Kingston, wherever you look in Ontario, it's a province digging out.
And we're stuck in the extreme cold. So as I said last night, take your pick. Do you want the snowy and windy conditions, or do you want the extreme cold? I don't know. Regardless, minus 19 in Winnipeg tomorrow afternoon. North winds a bit on the gusty side tomorrow, gusting up to 40 at times through the afternoon, so a bit of a breeze out there tomorrow. Minus 19 for Saturday, maybe a very slight chance of a couple of flurries, but other than that, not a lot to talk about. Minus 21, minus 22 into early next week, and then we start to slowly, very slowly climb back towards seasonal, minus 16 by the time we get to next Thursday. Well, it is always good to stop and smell the flowers, Brittany.
But a florist in Paris wants you to take it a step further. Take a bite out of our daily lift.
C'est bon, je vais le montrer. Hein. Donc c'est ça. Légèrement piquant, mais pas trop agressif.
Yes, her shop sells edible flower bouquets. This shop works with local producers in the country and avoids imported flowers. The florist says France has about 150 species of edible flowers.
Notably absent from her menu, red roses, a traditional Valentine's offering. Instead, she recommends carnations because they look almost like roses. What about a corpse flower?
Oh, I don't know about that one. But I feel like there's a lot of food bouquets that some people's partners, mine as well, would prefer instead of those flowers.
I'll take anything covered in chocolate.
Or maybe a bacon bouquet.
That too.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Have a special Valentine's. We will see you back here tomorrow just in time.
Stay warm.